The wrench slipped from my greasy fingers and clattered onto the garage floor at exactly 11:47 p.m. I'd been under the hood of my '92 Mustang for 3 hours, trying to fix a carburetor that had been giving me trouble for weeks. The mechanical work kept my hands busy while my mind churned over the disaster my marriage had become. That's when I heard Jessa's voice drifting through the thin wall separating our garage from the kitchen. She was on the phone, laughing in that throaty way she used to laugh with me back when we were happy, back when she actually came home before midnight. "Oh, please, Kevin's so predictable," she said, and my stomach dropped. Kevin. That's me. Kevin Hartwell, 41 years old, owner of Hartwell Auto Repair. Apparently predictable husband to a woman who'd rather discuss me with strangers than talk to me directly. I crept closer to the wall, my work boots silent on the oil-stained concrete. "He just sits there in that garage every night, playing with his little cars like some teenager," Jessa continued. "Honestly, Landon, sometimes I wonder what I ever saw in him." Landon. I'd heard that name before, whispered in phone conversations that ended abruptly when I walked into rooms. Landon Reeve, the real estate hotshot who'd been sniffing around the law firm where Jessa worked as a junior partner. No, he's completely clueless," she laughed again. "Kevin's so focused on being the loyal little husband that he can't see what's right in front of his face. It's almost pathetic, really." My hands clenched into fists. 15 years of marriage, and this is how she talked about me to another man, like I was some kind of joke, some obstacle in her path to whatever she thought she deserved. The kitchen door slammed open, and Jessa's heels clicked across the garage floor. She'd been out at another work function, wearing a black dress that cost more than most people's rent and smelling like expensive cologne that definitely wasn't mine. "Still playing mechanic?" she asked, her voice cold and sharp. Her blonde hair was perfectly styled despite the late hour, and her makeup looked freshly applied. She'd clearly made a stop somewhere between work and home. "Just fixing what's broken," I said, wiping my hands on a rag. "Someone has to keep things running around here." She rolled her eyes. "Oh, spare me the martyr routine, Kevin. You act like you're doing me some huge favor by hiding in this garage every night." "I'm not hiding. I'm working. Some of us still believe in taking care of what we have instead of looking for something better." The words hung in the air between us like a challenge. Jessa's green eyes flashed with something that might have been guilt, but it passed so quickly I almost missed it. "You know what?" she said, crossing her arms. "If you really don't like how I live my life, then maybe you should just leave. Find someone who appreciates your simple pleasures." Simple pleasures. Like she was talking about a dog who was content with table scraps. I studied her face in the harsh fluorescent light of the garage. This woman I'd loved since college, who'd promised to stand by me through better or worse, was essentially telling me to get out of her way so she could continue her affair in peace. "You want me to leave?" I asked quietly. "I want you to stop acting like I owe you something just because you fix cars and come home every night. Maybe if you had some ambition, some drive to be more than just a small-town mechanic, things would be different." She turned on her heel and headed for the door leading into the house. "I'm going back out. Don't wait up." The door slammed behind her, leaving me alone with the smell of motor oil and the echo of her ultimatum. I heard her car start in the driveway, then the sound of gravel crunching as she drove away to whatever rendezvous she had planned with Landon Reeve. I walked over to my workbench and sat down heavily on the stool. 15 years. 15 years of building a life together, of working 60-hour weeks to pay for her law school, of believing that we were a team, and now she was telling me to leave because I didn't like watching her cheat on me. The thing is, Jessa always underestimated me. She saw a guy in coveralls who got his hands dirty for a living and assumed that meant I was stupid. But you don't build a successful auto repair business from nothing without learning how to pay attention to details. And lately, I'd been paying very close attention indeed. I pulled out my phone and scrolled through the photos I'd been taking over the past few weeks. Jessa leaving the house in evening wear on nights when she claimed to be working late. Her car parked outside the Riverside Hotel downtown, credit card statements showing charges at restaurants I'd never been to, on dates when she said she was in depositions. Then there were the phone records. Hundreds of calls and texts to Landon Reeve's number, often in the middle of the night. The burner phone I'd found hidden in her jewelry box with messages that would make a sailor blush. I opened my laptop and pulled up the folder I'd been building for months. Screenshots, photos, financial records, even a few audio recordings from nights like tonight when she thought I couldn't hear her phone conversations. Everything I needed to prove that my wife of 15 years had been living a double life. But proof wasn't enough anymore. Jessa had just given me permission to leave, assuming I'd be too weak or too dependent to actually do it. She thought she held all the cards because she made more money, because she moved in fancier circles, because she'd convinced herself that I needed her more than she needed me. She was about to learn how wrong she was. I spent the next hour methodically going through our shared accounts, our joint assets, everything we'd built together during our marriage. By law, I was entitled to half of everything. But Jessa had been sloppy, keeping her affair expenses on our joint credit cards, using our shared computer for her secret communications. She'd handed me enough evidence to take much more than half. I started making lists, bank accounts, investment portfolios, the house, her precious BMW, even her designer wardrobe. Everything we'd acquired during our marriage was community property, and her adultery gave me significant leverage in any divorce proceedings. But this wasn't just about money. This was about respect. About 15 years of loyalty and dedication that she'd thrown away for some smooth-talking real estate developer who probably saw her as just another conquest. My phone buzzed with a text message from my neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. Saw Jessa leave again. You okay, honey? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible Reddit stories. Even the neighbors had noticed. The whole street probably knew my wife was cheating on me while I sat in my garage like some clueless fool. The humiliation burned in my chest, but it also fueled my determination. I typed back, I'm fine, Mrs. Patterson. Thanks for asking. But I wasn't fine. I was angry, hurt, and tired of being treated like a doormat by the woman I'd loved more than anything in the world. Jessa wanted me to leave? She thought I was too pathetic and predictable to fight back? Tomorrow, she was going to discover just how unpredictable I could be. I closed the laptop and turned off the garage lights. As I walked toward the house, I was already planning my next moves. Jessa had started this game when she decided to cheat on our marriage, but I was going to finish it. And when I was done, she'd understand exactly what she'd lost when she told me to leave. I woke up at 5 a.m. to the sound of Jessa's car pulling into the driveway. She'd been gone for 5.5 hours, which was a new record even for her. I lay in bed listening to her stumble through the house, trying to be quiet but failing miserably. The shower ran for 20 minutes before she finally crawled into bed, reeking of wine and that same cologne I'd smelled on her the night before. She thought I was asleep. She thought I was the same predictable Kevin who'd pretend not to notice her 4:30 a.m. arrival, who'd make coffee and act normal while she nursed her hangover and planned her next rendezvous. Instead, I got up at my usual 6 a.m. and started making phone calls. The first call was to my lawyer, Bill Morrison. Bill and I had gone to high school together, and he'd handled the legal work when I bought the auto shop. More importantly, he was a divorce attorney who didn't mess around. Kevin, it's pretty early, even for you, Bill said when he answered. I need to see you today. It's about Jessa. There was a pause. I see. How bad is it? Bad enough that I need to know all my options before she wakes up. Come by the office at 8. Bring everything you've got. The second call was to my bank. I'd been the primary account holder on our joint checking and savings accounts since we got married, back when Jessa was still in law school and I was supporting both of us. That gave me certain privileges she'd forgotten about over the years. I need to make some changes to my accounts, I told the manager when I arrived at the bank an hour later. I want to transfer funds and update the access permissions. It was all perfectly legal. I moved half of our joint savings into a new account with only my name on it. I updated our checking account so that any withdrawals over $500 required both signatures, and I requested detailed statements for the past 6 months, showing every charge and every transaction. The credit card statements were particularly interesting. Expensive dinners at restaurants across town, hotel charges, even a jewelry purchase from Tiffany's that I'd never seen. Jessa had been using our money to fund her affair, probably buying gifts for Landon with cash that I'd earned working 12-hour days at the shop. By the time I got to Bill's office, I had a folder 3 inches thick with evidence of Jessa's infidelity and financial misconduct. Holy cow, Kevin, Bill said as he flipped through the documents. She really didn't try to hide any of this, did she? She thought I was too stupid to notice, or too weak to do anything about it. Well, she was wrong on both counts. With this evidence, we can file for divorce on grounds of adultery. In this state, that means you're looking at a significantly favorable settlement. Maybe 60-40 in your favor, possibly more. What about the house? You've been making the mortgage payments from your business account, right? And your name is on the deed? Both our names are on the deed, but yeah, I've been paying the mortgage for 8 years now, ever since she started working at the law firm and decided her money was too important to waste on household expenses. Bill nodded grimly. That works in your favor. We can argue that you've been the primary financial contributor to the household while she's been spending marital assets on her extramarital relationship. How long will this take? If she contests it, maybe 6 months. If she's smart and takes a settlement, We could have it wrapped up in 60 days. I left Bill's office with a plan and a timeline, but I wasn't ready to file papers yet. First, I wanted Jessa to understand exactly what she'd done and exactly what it was going to cost her. I drove to the auto shop and spent the morning working on Mrs. Chen's Honda, trying to focus on the familiar routine of diagnostics and repair, but my mind kept drifting to Jessa, probably still asleep in our bed, completely unaware that her comfortable life was about to come crashing down around her. Around noon, my phone rang. It was Jessa, and she sounded panicked. "Kevin, what did you do to our bank accounts?" "What do you mean?" "I tried to pay for lunch and my card was declined. Then I called the bank, and they said there wasn't enough money in checking to cover it." I smiled grimly. She'd probably tried to pay for lunch with Landon, maybe at one of their usual romantic spots. The embarrassment must have been delicious. "I moved some money around this morning," I said calmly. "We need to be more careful about our spending." "You moved money around without discussing it with me?" "Like you discussed spending $3,000 at restaurants I've never been to? Or that $500 charge at Tiffany's last month?" The line went quiet. I could practically hear her brain working, trying to figure out how much I knew and how much trouble she was in. "Kevin, I can explain." "No need to explain anything, Jess. You told me last night that if I didn't like how you live your life, I should leave, so I'm making arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" "The kind that protect my interests while I figure out my next move. You wanted me to leave? Fine. But I'm not going to make it easy for you to keep funding your new lifestyle with my money." I hung up before she could respond. Let her stew on that for a while. The rest of the day passed in a blur of oil changes and brake repairs, normal work that felt surreal given the circumstances. Every time my phone rang, I expected it to be Jessa, but she didn't call back. She was probably too busy trying to figure out how to explain the situation to Landon, or maybe calling her own lawyer to see what options she had. I got home around 6 p.m. to find Jessa waiting in the living room, still in her work clothes but looking frazzled and angry. "We need to talk," she said. "I thought we talked last night. You were pretty clear about what you wanted. Don't play games with me, Kevin. I know you're upset about things, but you can't just freeze our accounts and expect me to..." "Expect you to what? Live within our means? Stop spending our money on your boyfriend?" Her face went pale. "I don't know what you think you know, but..." I pulled out my phone and started scrolling through the photos I'd taken. "You mean I don't know about Landon Reeve? About your late-night meetings at the Riverside Hotel? About the burner phone you keep hidden in your jewelry box?" Jessa's composure cracked completely. She looked like a deer caught in headlights, realizing that her careful deception had been blown wide open. "Kevin, please, it's not what you think." "It's exactly what I think. You've been cheating on me for months, probably longer. You've been using our money to pay for your affair. And last night, when I had the audacity to be upset about it, you told me to leave." I stood up and walked toward the stairs. "So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to leave, but first, I'm going to make sure you understand exactly what that means." "What are you talking about?" I turned back to look at her, this woman I'd loved and trusted and supported for 15 years, who'd thrown it all away for some smooth-talking developer with a fancy car and an expense account. "It means that half of everything we own is mine. The house, the cars, the investments, all of it. It means that your adultery gives me grounds for a divorce that will leave you with a lot less than you're used to. And it means that everyone is going to know exactly what kind of person you really are." Jessa's eyes widened. "You wouldn't dare. Try me." I went upstairs and started packing a bag. I wasn't actually leaving, not yet, but I wanted her to think I was. I wanted her to spend the night wondering what I was planning, what evidence I had, and how much damage I could do to her precious reputation. As I folded clothes into a suitcase, I could hear her downstairs on the phone, probably calling Landon or her friend Tori, trying to figure out how to handle the situation. But there was no handling this. She'd made her choice when she decided to cheat. Now she was going to live with the consequences. I carried my suitcase downstairs and set it by the front door. Jessa was still on the phone, but she hung up quickly when she saw me. "Kevin, please. We can work this out. We can go to counseling. We can what? Pretend that you haven't been lying to me for months? Pretend that you haven't been using our money to wine and dine another man? Pretend that you didn't tell me to leave just last night?" I picked up my suitcase and opened the front door. "You got what you wanted, Jess. I'm leaving. But don't get too comfortable, because this isn't over. Not by a long shot." I walked out into the evening air, leaving her standing in the doorway of our house, finally understanding that her predictable husband wasn't quite as predictable as she'd thought. I drove to a hotel across town and checked in for the night. Tomorrow, the real game would begin. I spent 3 days at the hotel, letting Jessa wonder what I was planning while I put the final pieces of my strategy together. She called constantly at first, leaving voicemails that ranged from angry to pleading to threatening. By the third day, the calls had stopped, which meant she'd probably hired her own lawyer and been told to stop communicating with me directly. That was fine. I wasn't ready to talk anyway. On Thursday morning, I drove back to the house. Jessa's BMW was gone, which meant she'd left for work. Perfect timing. I let myself in through the front door and got to work. The first thing I did was change the locks. Legally, I had every right to do it since my name was on the deed and I'd been paying the mortgage. Jessa would have to go through her lawyer if she wanted back in, which would take time and give me leverage. Next, I went through the house systematically, documenting everything with my phone's camera. Every piece of furniture, every appliance, every valuable item we'd acquired during our marriage. I took photos of the jewelry she'd left behind, including a diamond bracelet I'd never seen before that was probably a gift from Landon. Then I started packing her belongings. Not everything, just her clothes, toiletries, and personal items. I folded everything neatly and placed it all in boxes, which I then carried out to the front porch. By the time I was finished, there were 12 boxes stacked by the front door, along with 3 suitcases and her exercise equipment. I left a note on top of the boxes. You said I should leave if I didn't like how you lived. I decided you should be the one to leave instead. Your lawyer can contact my lawyer to discuss visitation rights for your belongings. Then I sat down in my living room and waited. Jessa arrived home around 6 p.m., and I heard her car screech to a halt in the driveway. Through the window, I watched her stare at the boxes on the porch, her face cycling through confusion, anger, and panic. She tried her key in the front door, then tried it again when it didn't work. Finally, she started pounding on the door. Kevin! Kevin, open this door right now! I walked to the window and looked out at her. She was still in her work suit, but her hair was disheveled and her makeup was smeared. She looked like a woman whose carefully controlled world was falling apart. The locks have been changed, I called through the glass. You'll need to find somewhere else to stay. You can't do this. This is my house too. And you can discuss that with your lawyer. I'm sure Landon has a spare bedroom you can use. Her face went bright red. She pulled out her phone and started dialing, probably calling her lawyer or the police. But I'd already checked with Bill Morrison, and everything I'd done was perfectly legal. As long as I wasn't preventing her from retrieving her personal belongings, which were now conveniently located on the front porch, I had every right to change the locks on my own house. 20 minutes later, a police cruiser pulled up in front of the house. Officer Martinez got out and walked up to the porch, where Jessa was waiting with her arms crossed. I opened the front door before he could knock. Evening, Officer Martinez. Kevin, we got a call about a domestic dispute. No dispute here. My wife and I are separated, and I've provided her with her personal belongings so she can relocate. Everything's been handled according to the law. Martinez looked at the boxes on the porch, then at Jessa, then back at me. Ma'am, are these your belongings? Yes, but he can't just lock me out of my own house. Actually, ma'am, if his name is on the deed and he's been paying the mortgage, he can change the locks as long as he's not preventing you from accessing your personal property. Martinez gestured to the boxes. It looks like he's made your belongings available to you. Jessa's mouth fell open. But where am I supposed to stay? That's not a police matter, ma'am. You'll need to work that out through your attorneys. After Martinez left, Jessa stood on the porch for another 10 minutes, staring at the boxes like she couldn't believe what was happening. Finally, she started loading them into her BMW, making multiple trips to fit everything in her car. I watched from the window as she drove away, probably heading to Landon's place or maybe a hotel. Either way, she was no longer my problem. The next morning, I got a call from Bill Morrison. Jessa's lawyer called. They want to set up a meeting to discuss temporary living arrangements and asset division. What did you tell them? I told them we'd be happy to discuss a fair settlement based on the evidence we have of her adultery and financial misconduct. I also mentioned that we'd be seeking primary ownership of the house given your financial contributions and her extracurricular activities. How did they respond to that? About like you'd expect. Lots of bluster about harassment and intimidation, but they know they don't have much leverage here. Your evidence is solid, and Jessa's behavior speaks for itself. Good. Set up the meeting for next week. I want to give her some time to think about what she's lost. But I wasn't done yet. Changing the locks and packing her belongings was just the beginning. Jessa had humiliated me for months, treating me like a fool while she carried on her affair. Now it was her turn to experience some humiliation. That afternoon, I drove to Jessa's law firm. I'd been there plenty of times over the years for office parties and company events, so I knew the layout. I also knew that Jessa's boss, Margaret Steinberg, was a stickler for professional conduct and firm reputation. I walked into the reception area carrying a manila envelope. Hi, I'm Kevin Hartwell, Jessa's husband, Is Margaret available? I have some documents I need to discuss with her regarding Jessa's recent situation. The receptionist, a young woman named Amy, who'd always been friendly to me at company events, looked confused. What kind of situation? It's a personal matter that may affect her work here. I'd prefer to discuss it directly with Margaret. 5 minutes later, I was sitting in Margaret Steinberg's corner office, watching her flip through printouts of Jessa's credit card statements and hotel receipts. I'm not sure why you're bringing this to me, Kevin, Margaret said carefully. Jessa's personal life is her own business? Normally, I'd agree, but she's been using sick days and personal time to meet with her friend, and she's been charging business lunches to the firm credit card when she was actually having romantic dinners with him. I pulled out another set of documents. These are her timesheets for the past 3 months, compared to her actual whereabouts based on credit card charges and phone records. She claimed to be in depositions on 12 different occasions when she was actually at hotels or restaurants with Landon Reeve. Margaret's expression grew serious as she reviewed the evidence. As a senior partner at a prestigious law firm, she couldn't afford to have associates who lied about their whereabouts and misused company resources. I appreciate you bringing this to my attention, she said finally. I'll need to conduct an internal review. Of course. I just thought you should know before word gets out publicly. Divorce proceedings can be messy. I left the law firm feeling satisfied. Jessa's professional reputation was about to take a serious hit, which would make it much harder for her to maintain the lifestyle she'd become accustomed to. But I still wasn't finished. That evening, I created a social media account under a fake name and started posting. Nothing illegal or defamatory, just public records and factual information. Photos of Jessa and Landon together at restaurants, copies of hotel receipts, screenshots of their text messages from her burner phone. I tagged mutual friends, neighbors, and colleagues. Within hours, the posts were being shared and commented on. The story of Jessa's affair was spreading through our social circle like wildfire. My phone started ringing around 9 p.m. It was Jessa, and she was furious. Take those posts down right now. What posts? You know exactly what posts. You're trying to destroy my reputation. I'm not trying to destroy anything. I'm just sharing the truth about what happened to our marriage. If that damages your reputation, maybe you should have thought about that before you decided to cheat. Kevin, please. This is going too far. People are calling me, texting me, asking questions I can't answer. Then maybe you should start telling the truth? I'll sue you for harassment. With what money? Last I checked, you were having trouble paying for lunch. I hung up and turned off my phone. Let her spend the night dealing with the fallout from her choices. Let her explain to her friends and family why her husband had evidence of her affair. Let her figure out how to rebuild her reputation after everyone she knew had seen proof of her betrayal. Jessa had wanted me to leave quietly, to disappear so she could continue her affair without complications. Instead, she was learning that actions have consequences, and that the predictable husband she'd taken for granted was capable of fighting back. The war was just getting started. 2 weeks later, Jessa's world had completely collapsed, and I had a front row seat to watch it happen. The social media posts had done their job. Within days, everyone in our social circle knew about her affair with Landon Reeve. Her friends stopped calling, her colleagues avoided her at work, and even her own sister had called to express disappointment and embarrassment. But the real damage came from Margaret Steinberg's internal investigation at the law firm. As I'd hoped, the evidence of Jessa's dishonesty about her whereabouts and misuse of company resources had led to serious consequences. She'd been placed on unpaid administrative leave pending a full review, which effectively meant her career at the firm was over. Without her income, Jessa couldn't afford to stay at the hotel where she'd been living since I changed the locks. She'd moved in with her friend Tori, but even that arrangement was strained. Tori was getting tired of having a house guest, especially one whose drama was affecting her own social standing. Meanwhile, Landon Reeve had disappeared from the picture entirely. As soon as the affair became public knowledge, he'd cut off all contact with Jessa. Apparently, a real estate developer who depended on his reputation in the community couldn't afford to be associated with a cheating scandal. So much for true love. I was getting regular updates on Jessa's situation through mutual friends who were eager to share gossip, and through my own careful observation. I'd drive by Tori's apartment complex occasionally, just to see if Jessa's BMW was still there. It always was, usually parked in the same spot, looking increasingly dusty and neglected. On a Friday afternoon, I got a call from Bill Morrison. Jessa's lawyer called. They want to discuss a settlement. What kind of settlement? They're willing to give you the house and 70% of the liquid assets in exchange for a quick, quiet divorce. No alimony, no ongoing financial obligations. I considered this. It was more than I'd expected to get, even with all the evidence of her adultery. but it also meant Jessa was desperate to end this situation and move on with her life. What's the catch? They want you to stop posting on social media and agree to a non-disclosure clause about the circumstances of the divorce. So she wants to buy her reputation back. That's about the size of it. I thought about it for a moment. The social media campaign had served its purpose. Everyone who mattered already knew the truth about Jessa's affair. Continuing to post about it would just make me look vindictive, but I wasn't ready to let her off the hook completely. Tell them I'll consider it, but I want to meet with Jessa directly first. Just the two of us. No lawyers. Kevin, I don't think that's a good idea. Emotions are running high, and I'm not going to do anything stupid, Bill. I just want to look her in the eye when we end this. 2 days later, Jessa agreed to meet me at a coffee shop downtown. It was neutral territory, public enough to prevent any dramatic scenes, but private enough for us to talk honestly. She looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was limp and unwashed. Her clothes were wrinkled, and she had dark circles under her eyes. The confident, polished woman who told me to leave 3 weeks ago had been replaced by someone who looked defeated and desperate. "Hello, Kevin," she said quietly as she sat down across from me. "Jess?" We sat in silence for a moment. Two people who'd once loved each other enough to promise forever, now strangers negotiating the terms of our separation. "I heard about your job," I said finally. "I'm sure you did. I'm sure you heard about everything." "Most of it, yeah. How's Landon?" Her face crumpled slightly. "He won't return my calls. Apparently I'm too much of a liability for his precious reputation." "I'm sorry." She looked up at me, surprised. "Are you really?" "I'm sorry that you threw away 15 years of marriage for someone who abandoned you the moment things got complicated. I'm sorry that you valued status and excitement more than loyalty and commitment. And I'm sorry that it took all this drama for you to realize what you'd lost." Tears started running down her cheeks. "Kevin, I made a mistake. A huge, terrible mistake. But does that really mean you have to destroy everything? My job, my friends, my reputation? I didn't destroy anything, Jess. You did. I just made sure people knew the truth about what happened. Can't we find a way to fix this? Can't we try to work things out?" I studied her face, looking for any sign of the woman I'd fallen in love with 20 years ago. She was still there, somewhere under the desperation and regret, but it was too late for that to matter. "No," I said simply. "We can't." "Why not?" "Because you told me to leave. Because you spent months lying to me, cheating on me, and using our money to fund your affair. Because when I finally confronted you about it, your first instinct was to blame me for not having enough ambition to keep you interested." I leaned forward, keeping my voice low but firm. "But mostly because I don't trust you anymore, and I don't love you anymore. You made sure of that." She sobbed quietly for a few minutes while I sat there feeling nothing but a mild sense of pity. This woman had been the center of my world for 15 years, and now she was just a stranger who'd caused me pain. "What do you want from me?" she asked finally. "I want you to sign the divorce papers and disappear from my life. I want you to stop trying to contact me, stop asking mutual friends about me, and stop pretending that what happened between us was some kind of misunderstanding that we can fix." "And in return?" "In return, I'll stop posting about your affair and agree to keep the details of our divorce private. You can tell people whatever story you want about why we split up." She nodded slowly. "And the financial settlement?" "Take what your lawyer offered. The house is mine, 70% of the assets are mine, and you walk away with enough money to start over somewhere else." "Somewhere else?" "Jess, everyone in this town knows what you did. Your career here is finished, your reputation is shot, and your friends don't want to be associated with you. If you're smart, you'll take the money and move somewhere you can start fresh." She stared at me for a long moment, probably realizing that I was right. There was nothing left for her here except humiliation and regret. "I really did love you, Kevin, at the beginning anyway." "I know, I loved you too. But that doesn't change what you did, and it doesn't change what happens next." I stood up and put on my jacket. "Have your lawyer call Bill with the signed papers. After that, I don't want to see you or hear from you again." I walked out of the coffee shop and drove home to the house that was now officially mine. As I pulled into the driveway, I felt a sense of closure that I hadn't experienced in months. The war was over, and I'd won more decisively than I'd ever imagined possible. Jessa had told me to leave because she thought I was too weak and predictable to fight back. Instead, she'd learned that underestimating someone who knows your secrets is a dangerous mistake. 3 days later, Bill Morrison called to confirm that the divorce papers had been signed and filed. Jessa had also given notice at Tori's apartment and put her BMW up for sale. Word around town was that she was moving to California, where she had a cousin who might be able to help her find work. I never saw her again. 6 months later, I was sitting in my garage working on the Mustang when Mrs. Patterson knocked on the door frame. "How are you doing, Kevin? Really, I mean." I looked up from the engine I was rebuilding and considered the question. My business was thriving, my house was peaceful, and I'd started dating a woman named Lisa who appreciated loyalty and honesty. Most importantly, I'd learned that I was stronger and more resilient than I'd given myself credit for. "I'm doing just fine, Mrs. Patterson. Better than fine, actually." "Good," she said with a smile. "You deserve to be happy." As she walked back to her house, I returned to my work on the Mustang. The engine was finally running smoothly, all the broken parts replaced or repaired. Sometimes, I reflected, you have to tear something apart completely before you can build it back better than it was before. Jessa had told me to leave if I didn't like how she was living her life. In the end, she was the one who left, and I was the one who got to keep everything we'd built together. The house, the assets, the respect of our community, and most importantly, my self-respect. It turned out that being predictable wasn't such a bad thing after all. People knew they could count on me to be honest, loyal, and fair. They also learned that they could count on me to fight back when someone tried to take advantage of those qualities. Jessa had gambled everything on the assumption that I was too weak to stand up for myself. She'd lost that bet, and the cost had been everything she thought she wanted. As for me, I discovered that sometimes the best revenge is simply refusing to be a victim, and that the most satisfying victories are the ones where you don't have to compromise your principles to win. The Mustang's engine purred as I revved it, finally running the way it was supposed to, just like everything else in my life these days.